I stood there frozen in the doorway of my own bedroom, or rather what used to be my bedroom, watching 12 suitcases scattered across the bed where I had slept beside my husband for more than 20 years. My young daughter-in-law, Michelle, was organizing her mother's clothes in the drawers that still held the scent of my Anthony, who had died 2 years ago, while directing at me a smile that seemed to have been cut with a razor blade. "Mrs. Carmen," she said, without even looking at me, "your room is now in the back. My mother needs more space, and this is the best room in the house." The words came out of her mouth with the same naturalness as someone commenting on the weather, but each syllable pierced my chest like shards of glass. I felt my knees go weak, my vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I might faint right there, in front of the woman who had just expelled me from the sanctuary where I had built an entire life. In that moment of shock and humiliation, my mind flew back in time, trying to understand how I had gotten there. I, Carmen Oliveira, at 62 years old, had become a stranger in my own home. But it hadn't always been like this. There was a time when this house breathed love and respect, when my Anthony still walked through these corridors with his wide smile and his weekend projects. We built every square foot of this home with our own hands, he, an experienced mason, me, a retired teacher who wasn't afraid to get her nails dirty with cement mortar. I clearly remember the day we decided to buy this empty lot in the Hillcrest neighborhood. It was 1985. I was only 25 years old and had just graduated from teaching college. Anthony worked 7 days a week to gather the bricks, while I gave private lessons in the afternoons and weekends to supplement our income. For 4 years, our routine was sacred. We would wake up at 5 in the morning, have black coffee with sugar bread, and he would leave for the construction site while I headed to the public school where I taught children from 6 to 10 years old. At dusk, we would meet at the lot and work until we could no longer see in the dark. My hands became call-used from carrying so many blocks and mixing mortar. My feet would swell inside rubber boots, my face burned from so much sun. But each wall that went up was a victory, each room that took shape was a piece of our dream materializing. The master bedroom was the last room to be finished. Anthony insisted on personally installing every outlet, every light switch, every finishing detail. "This is going to be our castle, my queen," he would say, running his rough hand over my sweaty face. "Here we're going to grow old together, raise our children, and one day we'll tell our grandchildren how we built all this from scratch." We painted the walls a soft blue that reminded us of the sky from the countryside where we were both born. We bought our first double bed from a used furniture store, a solid wood piece that Anthony restored with such care it looked new. It was in that bed that I conceived my only child, Robert. It was there that I spent sleepless nights when he had fever. It was there that I cried when we lost 3 babies before they could breathe. And it was there that I held my husband's hand in his final hours when cancer finally defeated his warrior's strength. Robert grew up seeing our example of struggle and determination, but something got lost along the way. Perhaps because we gave him everything we didn't have, perhaps because he never had to fight for anything, my son became a complacent man, dependent on others' approval and incapable of making difficult decisions. At 35 years old, he was still living with us when he met Michelle at a business administration graduation party. She was everything I hadn't been in my youth. Platinum blonde, always manicured nails, designer clothes, spoke fluent English, and had that big city way that intimidated anyone from the countryside. Robert fell head over heels in love, or rather, became completely dazzled by that woman who represented a world he had always wanted to belong to, but never knew how to reach. When they announced their engagement, 6 months after meeting, I tried to hide my concern. It wasn't just a mother's jealousy, although I admit a hint of that existed. It was feminine intuition, that sixth sense we women develop throughout life to identify people who aren't what they seem. Michelle never looked me in the eyes when we talked. Her questions about my life sounded protocolary, as if she were fulfilling a social obligation. When Robert wasn't around, she barely spoke to me. And there was something about the way she looked at our house, not with affection or curiosity, but with a cold and calculating assessment, as if she were mentally cataloging each object and its possible value. The wedding took place in an expensive ceremony they couldn't afford. Robert borrowed money from the bank, used all his retirement funds, and still needed my help to cover the costs. I handed over my retired teacher's savings without hesitation, because I wanted to see my son happy. Michelle chose every detail of the party: imported flowers, designer dress, buffet at a sophisticated venue, gift registry at a chic department store. I felt out of place at my own family celebration, wearing my best outfit, which still looked provincial next to her guests, and trying to talk to people who treated me with distant politeness, as if I were the family's maid and not the groom's mother. During the honeymoon in Cancun, another expense that weighed on the family budget, I was alone in the house for the first time since Anthony's death. It was during those 2 weeks of silence that I began to notice signs I had ignored. Michelle had already begun to make small changes to the environment. The dining table cloth had been replaced with a neutral-colored one. The photo frames with family pictures were temporarily stored for general cleaning. My little pots of aromatic plants, which had always been on the kitchen window, had been reorganized to catch better light in a less visible area. When I questioned these changes, she responded with that icy smile. "Mrs. Carmen, I'm just trying to modernize the environment a bit. I'm sure you'll like the final result." The final result began to reveal itself gradually in the following months. Michelle convinced Robert that they needed more privacy, so the TV room where we used to gather after dinner became a kind of private office for the couple. The meals, once sacred moments of conversation and coexistence, became silent encounters where she played with her phone while I tried to make conversation with my son. Robert, visibly torn between pleasing his wife and maintaining respect for his mother, chose the easiest path, pretending not to notice the growing tension and taking refuge in long hours of extra work. The situation deteriorated even more when Michelle got pregnant. I was radiant with the prospect of being a grandmother, but my joy was quickly suffocated by the way she transformed the pregnancy into a manipulation tool. Every suggestion I made about the baby, from names to nursery decoration, was delicately discarded. "Mrs. Carmen, I know you have experience, but times have changed. Nowadays we follow more modern methods." When I offered the baby clothes I had saved from Robert, she thanked me with fakeness. "How cute, but I already bought everything new. I don't really believe in these used things for babies." Each rejection was a small but deep cut in my hope of participating in raising my grandson. Unfortunately, Michelle lost the baby in the 5th month of pregnancy. It was a very painful period for the whole family, and I genuinely sympathized with her pain. I tried to get closer, offer the support that a more experienced woman can give to another who goes through such a loss, but she completely rejected me, creating an even higher barrier between us. Robert, devastated by the loss, became overprotective of his wife, attending to all her whims and interpreting any frustration of mine as lack of sensitivity to the difficult moment they were living. It was during this vulnerable period that the most drastic changes in the house dynamics began. Michelle claimed she needed space to process grief and began questioning practically everything in our routine. My friends, who used to come for coffee on Saturday afternoons, suddenly made too much noise for someone who was in emotional recovery. My habit of listening to music while cooking disturbed her concentration for reading the self-help books that the psychologist had recommended. Even my garden, my sacred refuge since Anthony's death, became a source of conflict when she complained that the flowers attracted bees that could be dangerous. People close to us began to notice the situation. My sister Helena, always more direct than me, couldn't contain herself during a visit. "Carmen, you're being expelled from your own house and pretending you don't see it. That girl is manipulating you, and Robert is letting it happen." My neighbor Mrs. Conception, with whom I've shared confidences for more than 20 years, was even clearer. "That daughter-in-law of yours has the look of someone who won't stop until she gets what she wants. And what she wants is to get you out of the way." But I, always too optimistic for my own good, insisted on believing that things would resolve naturally. "It's just a phase," I told myself. "When she recovers from the loss, everything will go back to normal." If you've been following stories like this and want to continue receiving real accounts of overcoming and feminine strength, it's worth subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes that show how ordinary women find extraordinary courage in the most difficult moments. But normal never returned. Instead, the situation escalated to levels I never imagined possible. The last straw came on an ordinary Tuesday in March, when I arrived home after a routine medical appointment and found Michelle completely reorganizing my wardrobe. She was separating my clothes into piles, to donate, to store, and to keep. When I questioned what was happening, she explained with that exaggerated patience used to speak to children. "Mrs. Carmen, you have so many clothes you haven't worn in years. I thought I'd help do a general cleaning. You'll see how much more organized it gets." My hands trembled when I saw in the donation pile the wool coat that Anthony gave me on our last Christmas together. It was a simple piece, brown colored, but it carried his scent and the memory of that special day. Also, there were 2 blouses I had hand-sewn when we were young and didn't have money to buy ready-made clothes. They were pieces without commercial value, but every thread had history, every patch had love. "These clothes are not for donation," I said, trying to keep my voice firm. "They're important memories for me." Michelle sighed as if dealing with a stubborn person. "Mrs. Carmen, you can't get so attached to things from the past. You need to move forward, move forward." As if the objects that carry our history were just emotional trash. As if the past I built with so much effort were something I should be ashamed of. In that moment, I realized that Michelle wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to erase me. Each change, each improvement, each modernization, was a step in the process of eliminating my presence from that house, until I became an uncomfortable tenant in the home I built with my own hands. The final revelation came unexpectedly, through a conversation I overheard by chance.